And I think the biggest part of website projects, particularly now, is we're all trying to do so much. We're all trying to be the designer, be the copywriter. And really, these are individual roles that I kind of want to highlight in this kind of presentation. So it won't be a deep dive. It will just be a kind of overview. And I can go into, and there's a little special treat at the end, but I can go into a bit more depth in the future. And we're not going to be covering e-commerce. It's just going to be a light overarching view of website projects. Who is this aimed at? Probably agencies who are currently building websites or are looking to build websites and really trying to fill the gaps and trying to understand the complete project workflow. But I thought it could also be quite helpful for clients who want a website built and they are unsure of what exactly goes into it and what team members they need to kind of recruit or hire. So hopefully these can answer those questions, and hopefully that will be my longest slide. So who am I? My name is Samuel Gregory. I've been a pro member for a year now, and I consider myself a web consultant. I help businesses kick off and start their website project, which falls exactly in line with why I'm doing this talk. I'm creative director of Jupiter and the Giraffe, which build websites and we build web apps for emerging technologies. And I've also been a senior front-end developer for over 10 years. So I've sort of been both sides of the coin, development and kind of business side of things. We're going to cover today kind of all the individual roles that go into building a website. On the screen now, you'll see kind of a lot of the different areas that we're going to go into. And also the roles that go into those particular roles. So, and then further along, you've got testing, launch, and maintenance. So we'll get into all these different topics. Discovery. The big thing about discovery is really just alignment. And it's also the most important part of the project, absolutely the most important part of the project. It's all well and good, you know, in the old days when we would produce a questionnaire or something like that, but websites are way more important now, and they're looking to achieve so much. So that's why discovery is the most crucial part of the project. What do we do in discovery? Well, we try and identify the purpose of the website, the KPIs, what is the website looking to achieve. We're hopefully going to get some stakeholder buy-in, so the people who are involved in the project and want to see it succeed, hopefully they're involved in discovery and they get bought into the whole ambitions of the project. And as agencies, it allows us to fully understand the scope. Again, a questionnaire was great at one time in our lives, but bigger websites need us to really dig in. Like, it takes me at least 3 or 4, even just one-on-one discussions with one person to fully start to understand a website. When you've got a team of people, we need everyone to be on the same page. So the role of us here is to really incite questions and incite, make you think of things you wouldn't have thought about. As an agency, that's what we try and do to our clients who attend our discovery. So we're not just glorified note takers. Typically you have a strategist and a UXer involved in the discovery. They're really driving the conversations and facilitating the questions. Obviously the key stakeholders. Sometimes you have marketing, and sometimes you'll bring in a lead developer or a lead designer to kind of bring their perspectives into the conversation, which are sometimes really interesting and really important, because as sort of, marketing or people who aren't doing the work, we don't think about certain things. So that's why it's good to have those involved. We discuss this is kind of our methodology at Jupiter and the Giraffe, what we do. So this might not necessarily be exactly what you do, but I do think these, in whichever way you spin it, these are kind of what's discussed. So the users, who is a site for, we build user profiles around those and try and think of ways that we can serve specific users. We talk about the brand, and this facilitates the design of the website if we're doing the design and trying to get under the hood. I remember when we first started building websites, we just used to design it and not really think about anything. But I think the design of the website really needs to underpin the brand of the company that we're working with. And then of course the goals, what we spoke about, the goals of the website. What are they trying to do? What are the revenue goals, awareness goals, and efficiency goals? that the website's trying to achieve, and then we can prioritize those with our stakeholders in the room, because then they can get buy-in, they can get ownership, they can gain ownership over what happens when, basically. The second part of discovery for us is more on the technical side. So especially if we're plugging into an existing website, what existing technologies do we need to be aware of? What APIs are we plugging into? Is there an existing code base? What language are we writing these things in? Basically, what is already there, and potentially any preferences around those things that the client might have. We also talk about the features and get some idea of what specific features a client might want. Previously, when we talk about the users, and I said about those user flows, we think about what the user might want, and new ideas might come around about that. And because you're thinking from a different way, and often clients don't think of a customer, a user perspective. So, but here, again, I guess it gives them an opportunity to think, right, well, we wanted this drop down, or we wanted this map feature or something. It's really highlighting what features they have in mind. We also get them to think about tags and events and goals, and this is more along the lines of Google Analytics. What are the goals? What are the goals that we are measuring? Like, are certain pages supposed to be measured, or a certain action supposed to be measured? And we try and get those at this stage. And also, crucially, what browsers we support. If it's a big corporate website, they might need to support older browsers, especially if they have data from older websites or their existing website, and a lot of their users on, say, IE8, then we need to support IE8. So there's another aspect of it. And we also get an idea of their sitemap, where the page, how it's laid out, and all the rest of it, and we'll get into that in just a second. Typically, we run a session. It may last a couple of days or a few hours, depending on how many people and all the rest of it, but we take at least a week to come back with some kind of solution, some kind of outline, a proposal of an outline, what we think the website should generally trying to achieve, and summarize everything we've learned, and then we play that back to the client. It's really important that you play it back to the client, because you might have misunderstood anything. And then, of course, it's just a task of just trying to work those things out. But it's just an alignment piece, really. Is everyone on the page? And depending on what kind of service you run, with my web consulting, I might do that, and I might present them a solution, and then they take that and then they can execute it with whoever they want. But that's kind of the results of discovery. The first kind of phase of the project is building the website content. And you might have seen the discussion that I put in the group around which comes first, content or wireframes. And I think there's a general consensus that content comes first, but also that it's not 100%, right? So the content of the website is the copy, the images, the text. What is it saying on what specific pages? And you begin to apply that to a loose IA, information architecture, or sitemap, but these are essentially the same things. And we outline the general overall hierarchy of the pages and how they're linked to each other. On an e-commerce site, this will be huge: login pages, admin pages, all the rest of it. But if we're dealing with just marketing sites, it might be quite small, and you won't go into as much depth. I've rarely seen a marketing site that's any deeper than this, really, especially now when we're talking about landing pages and acquisitions, where we just want to grab people. Really, you want a concise, easy to navigate website. So that's kind of what a high level sitemap will look like, and how we treat it. And then we can start applying content. The copywriter will be responsible for starting to apply content to those pages. And the content should actually that we should identify the purpose of each individual page, and the copy should reflect and drive that conversion. What is the purpose, and content should allow that journey for the user to kind of follow down. And this is just with words at this point. What are we going to say? They should also take into consideration SEO. We should be looking at what keywords is this page supposed to be firing for, like what we're trying to hit. I recently I'm building a website at the moment for someone where they're having cannibalization issues, where multiple pages are all fighting for the same keywords. So it's important that each page is identifying their own keywords and going for those keywords, and the copy should revolve around that. And it should do it in a way that reflects the brand's tone of voice, which is, it's a tricky task, very, very tricky task. And it might also be an opportunity to start putting together the meta content. What shows up in Google when a certain page is found, and the description, does it have a call to action, various things like that. And no surprise there, a copywriter might use something as simple as Google Docs, Microsoft Word, Grammarly. There's, word processing things. It's no big deal there. So that's content. And at the end of it, I guess we should have a clear idea of all the different pages and the kind of content that's going to exist on those pages. And then we can start to develop our user experience around it. Now, user experience has morphed into this big global term which encompasses design, interaction, and what typically was stated as UX. And I'm going to go into those specific areas really briefly because it's such a big area now. Typically from a UX perspective, and again, this might be the same person nowadays, but they're very user focused and they're driven by the KPIs of the website and the user behaviors. So very psychological type of role really, and they take all this stuff into account, and then they can develop a prototype around that. Then they start to take the content, form it into a user-friendly way, and build a prototype where you can start to interact with a very, very bare bones website, black and white boxes. There's nothing sexy about it at all, and they'll take this to users and try and test this thing against users and see how they behave. Does it take them down a certain path? Do they understand the path that they're on, and various things like that? And then they'll refine that then, and refine that, and then add it to the prototype, and really just not distracted by design at all, just to get something that works solely for the user. And they might use something like XD, Adobe XD, Vision, Azure, Balsamiq, Figma. There's loads of them out there, and you can build a wireframe in these tools, but a lot of them allow you to build prototypes in these tools. And then the UI as well, again, under this umbrella of user experience. Really, it's just skinning the design of using and taking the brand aspects and skinning those wireframes. A designer should be aware of visual hierarchy. They should be aware of accessibility as well. Definitely color contrast, size of text, and all the rest of it. That's what mindset we should have, what hat I guess we should have on when we're looking into UI design. And of course, color increases engagement and makes it interesting. So they should be aware of these things. And typically and UXers, to be fair, UX designers, they come from a way of mobile first. The reason why we go mobile first is because of through limitation comes creativity, or creativity comes through, I don't know, something like that. Having mobile first really streamlines our mindset and how we're really taking a user through. It's not over cluttered, and then we progressively enhance and we add features and certain things as we get more screen real estate. They might use some tools like Sketch, Illustrator, Experience Designer, and Figma. You might have clocked that they were also used by UXers. And again, if this is under the same bracket, you might be thinking Experience Designer is a pretty good solid choice if you're wanting to get into experience design. Figma is fantastic, though it's free. It's the one that I personally use and what I get my team to use. So that's also a good tool. They're all vector based and they're infinitely scalable. I would say Illustrator is kind of on its way out. I don't know if anyone's used Illustrator recently, but Illustrator is kind of on its way out, as it doesn't handle, or it didn't used to handle, grids so well, whereas Experience Designer and Figma and Sketch are really geared towards website design. And I want to breeze over this one because it's really not thought of as an individual role at all, but an interaction designer. It's the sole responsibility of an interaction designer is someone who thinks of the little interactions, the little animations that not only look nice, they look sexy, but they communicate very well. Like what happens when I move something is from a user perspective, am I understanding what's happening right now through these interactions and why they're happening as well? So that it's an interesting role, often almost certainly never a sole role, but it's certainly a hat that we need to wear. It's too easy to put in animations and stuff like that. They've got to be meaningful and tasteful. Development, obviously the biggest, not necessarily the biggest actually, but it's a very big aspect to building a website is how a website can exist. Otherwise it's just images on a page, right? And it's often a hugely overlooked aspect to building a website. I feel like I'm a developer, by the way. It probably doesn't show, I'm a developer, but I feel like websites have come along so much since the days of creating a HTML document, uploading it to a server and it being there. And I still think clients are stuck in this mindset, and also agencies are stuck in the mindset that website development is this thing. And you absolutely can build websites in that way of writing a file and uploading to a server. But as security becomes a bigger deal, we need to take it a bit more seriously about how we develop a website. So hopefully we'll breeze over some aspects to it that you might not have heard of before. Git is essentially where the code is stored. It used to be that you write it on your machine, you upload it to a server somewhere, a hosting service, and then at the end of the project you zip the files up and email them over to your client. And Git is a way of a service like GitHub or Bitbucket, where it's stored in the cloud. All of the code is stored in the cloud, and all the developers, whether it's 1 or 6, they can all contribute to the same block of code without overwriting each other's code or anything like that. It also enables us to roll back if something goes wrong. We can look at older versions because it's completely version controlled. So if something goes wrong in the live site, you can just roll back and re-upload it, and it integrates very well with a few different tools, which I don't want to go too much into this, but CD and CI, essentially they run tests and they can deploy code. So they can integrate with the Git repo, what we call it, and they take the code and deploy it to the server. Because really, once you set up your server, you should not touch it. Absolutely do not touch it. You've got it running PHP, you've got it running whatever, just don't touch it from that point onwards, really. You're just risking too much, especially if it's a high profile website. You're risking way too much to accidentally bring that down. I've done it. Oh, it's a horrible feeling. Your heart sinks. So that's CD and CI, and I definitely implore looking into that if you are taking development seriously. But hosting is obviously just where the website is stored, where it is hosted. You might be familiar with like HostGator, Bluehost, and GoDaddy. I'm not a massive fan of these things because they just don't give me the flexibility that I need to build websites on. They're great for clicking and just having something spun up, but I feel like they're expensive too. You know, AWS, and Google, Amazon Web Services and Google, they're actually really cheap. It just takes a little bit of time to set them up in the first place. But essentially, they're all doing the same thing. They're serving your website. They handle the SSL certificates. But you also might have, again, because websites become more intricate, you also have 3 different hostings for your website. You have a staging, a development, and production hosting environments. And essentially, whilst you're working on it, you see it. And the idea is these 3 environments are exactly the same. There should be no difference in the configuration of these different environments, because while you're working on a website and you're making changes, you should see it in development. And then there should be no nasty surprises when it moves over to production. So you can kind of work, add features, and then when everyone's happy, you move it over to the production environment. Staging is a kind of middle ground. Development is kind of, you expect it to be broken because the devs are using that. Staging is typically where the client is looking at, and you say, right, we've just done a release, look at the staging environment, and they can give you a thumbs up or thumbs down. And then you take staging over into production. Pingdom is a service you might be interested in. It actually essentially just pings your website and tests that it's alive, that it's working. And if it isn't, it will send you a warning. So this could help with maintenance contracts. Front-end development, is, again, a specific role. We hear this term full stack, which is everything, but it encompasses front-end development. It's the visual part of the website. It takes the data and displays the data. It's responsible for the design of the website. A front-end developer should be aware of accessibility and how they can write accessible semantic code that can be read by Google and understood by screen readers. So this is an important aspect to look at when you're trying to get into front-end development. It's not just producing the designs. You take the designs and you make it into something that a computer can read. And they should also be responsible for the speed and the optimization of the whole overall website, really. So that's their role. The back-end developer would be responsible for the database, like where the data is stored, and they get that data, right? So the front end will fire a request over to a back-end API, we call it. It's like a layer, if you imagine that. And then the back end is kind of like saying, well, what do you want? Okay, I'm going to go and get it. That's the best analogy I can give for a back end developer. It's really just an interface, and they are different disciplines. There are different. If you're a developer, they are different. There are different mindsets that a back end developer will have than a front end developer. Front end developers typically are more visual. They're more user focused, whereas a back end developer might just be way more logical and they're normally responsible for the hosting, because their code is normally very dependent on the hosting technology, and they're also normally responsible for structuring the databases. So your users table, or your, I don't know what you might have, but you have separate tables, and they'll be responsible for setting those up. And then obviously we can encompass these things in CMS and platforms. So you could have a headless CMS, which essentially is just a CMS, and you have your separate front end, and you make calls to a headless CMS, and it gives you the data back. I'm using my hands here, hoping you can see my screen to try and illustrate this. But a monolithic one is all-encompassing. So everything is happening within the one code base, and you don't really separate them out. Hence why it's called monolithic. It's fetching the data, it's presenting the data, all in the one code base. And then you also might be familiar with the page builders, something like Webflow, Elementor. These essentially are monolithic in that they deal with the data and present the data, but they also enable us to modify the designs and change the designs in the tools. So whereas the previous two are a more bespoke experience, where you have the separate front end, separate back end, or you want to do more coding, these take away a lot of the code and a lot of writing any sort of code. I think you will go further if you know code, but you can absolutely do these things without writing any code. SEO analytics is obviously a big part of the website, making sure that we're tracking everything, and you can use tools like Google Analytics, which obviously tracks numbers. Hotjar tracks engagement, so you can use Hotjar and you can see a heat map of your website, where people are looking and what they're clicking on, and what page are they spending most of their time on, at which section of the page as well. So it's an interesting tool. Obviously you need to get all this set up in the development phase, make sure everything's tracking nicely. And setting up your sitemap and your robots.txt. These are important things for Google, and you just submit those to Google then. And also start applying the events and the tags that we spoke about in Discovery, to make sure that we're tracking specific goals and conversions and things like that. Again, all kind of done in the development phase. I'm not going to claim to be an expert on GDPR. Unfortunately, no matter where you are in the world, unless you're explicitly blocking EU users, you need to comply with GDPR. That's just how it is, because the web is open to everyone. So I'm not going to go into this. Matomica is a great little startup that trying to make it simpler. So I'd go to their website and try and learn some more. And it's all about data protection and how you can give access to data. Testing's a big one as well. You can do two different types of testing. You've got pen testing, which tests the robustness and the security of the application. And essentially a third party tries to break your website. Secondly, you've got UAT, which is user acceptance testing. So all the links working? Are the user journeys able to be followed? Is everything kind of working? And it's good to have third parties do this because they think of things in ways that you don't normally think about. And then, of course, the launch of the website is the final phase. And really, that's just the beginning. It's about handing those source files over, but really it should be giving them access to Git. Documentation is a big thing that's overlooked. How can someone come in and modify and change this website later down the line? What were your intentions when you built a certain feature? Really making it easy for things to for another agency or another developer or another person to pick up where they're left off. And then it's okay to not be 100% complete at launch. Again, websites have become so big, so big that it's impossible to have everything 100%. It was easier way back in the day, but now done is better than perfect. And that's why when we launch, we do more testing and more cross-browser testing, essentially. Maintenance is a big thing as well. It could be something you offer. Some agencies, they just hand over the website and that's then done. But if you are offering maintenance, often that bundles hosting, bug fixes, feature development, and looking at analytics and assessing the analytics and providing potential features, feature enhancements to the website. And this is a kind of rolling kind of thing that we offer our clients. And really, at least 3 months of data is crucial to start really seeing data and to actually be able to act on it. But depending on the size of the website, you might find it's less, you might find it's more. Just to finish off now, project management of a website. There's kind of two major ways to build a project, to manage a project. Waterfall is good if you're going through things in a very linear way, which we kind of just have: content, UX, design, development. When you know what you're doing, this is a great solution, and I would look into Waterfall if that's interesting to you. If you're doing something a little bit more experimental, I would certainly look into Agile, which is a way of just committing to very short 2 weeks of features or 2 weeks of progress. And then you test that progress, and then you may change something. So it's very iterative, and it can be long and it can be slow, but apps tend to benefit from this sort of process. Tools we use for project management on website projects. I love Trello because it's free, but ClickUp is pretty cool. Monday's pretty cool. Team Gantt is quite cool as well. I mean, yeah, you can see for yourself. These are some tools that we use for project management. There it is. I don't know how long that was, but I thank you for your patience. I'm actually going to be producing a book about modern web development where I'm going to kind of go a bit deeper into all this stuff. There's a link that you can sign up and register your interest to it. I'd love to be able to just go into a little bit more detail. Like I say, this was a big overview of website projects. So now that's out of the way, I would love to take some questions if you have them.
I have a question.
Lovely.
So what is your typical development process, and what tools are you using? Just briefly.
What do you mean? Sorry, what do you mean?
Maybe I should be more precise. So if you have to develop a simple website for 20 pages with, I don't know, just a basic website that would take you under a month of development.
Sure. I'm a developer. I work a lot faster writing code. If you are going down that route, I would pick a tool. If it is something like Webflow, stay in Webflow, because if you're trying to learn different tools on a project, it's just going to slow you down. So without getting too boring, I use Nuxt on our projects because I know how Nuxt works, and that's a very bespoke, and I have a very specific setup. So I productized it almost. I'm trying to use Webflow a lot more for smaller websites, but there are big limitations on the feature set. So that's what I would use. But I don't think any of them are particularly bad or good. I think just get really good at one and make that your focus. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. And if customers, you mentioned earlier that you sometimes you need to work with customers on existing projects. So if they have like a WordPress website or something like that, and they have pushback towards other platforms, and they just need a fix on the existing website, how would you approach that with the customer?
I would give myself at least a day to get my head in the game. Some websites can be built terribly, particularly in WordPress, because it's just been going for so long. So I'd give myself at least a day to say, let me look at the code, let me understand it, and obviously that's paid for. Normally you can get your head around it. I have had to tell a client once that we have to redo it because they didn't create the theme properly, and I was dealing with Minify code, so I just couldn't pick it apart. So that's generally my approach. I give myself a bit of a buffer to understand the project. If they're asking me to get involved with something, or if it's way out over my head, I'm personally, Jupyter and Java, we outsource a lot of our development. I'm still involved in a lot of development because I enjoy it, but we still outsource it. So I look for partners who are specific in that. If it's a Shopify website, I look for a partner who's working in Shopify as well. So that's another avenue I take if they're asking me to work with an existing code base.
Yeah, thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much.
Nice. Do you guys have any more questions?
I want to make a comment, and I have questions, of course. Hi,
Lovely.
My name is Miralda.
Hey, Miralda.
I want to thank you for your presentation. I started studying code like 2 years. It took me like a whole year to understand everything that you show in this presentation. So I think it's pretty neat that like
Crash
learning
course.
GitHub and all that stuff. I mean, they offer you courses and everything is separate, and you have to do a lot of research in Stack Overflow.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you two things. Do you share on project management of the website? Do you make that with your customer? Do you share that with your customer? Do you review it with your customer at every process, every week? Or is that just something you personally use to manage your project?
Good question. Depends on. Sometimes I like to be really transparent because trust is a big thing. I do tend to prefer sharing. I've started a project today. I've invited my client to the Trello board. They're able to see the progress. I have been on projects where we've had one Trello board for the developers and then one for the client, just to manage a bit of expectation. It really just depends on the kind of client you've got. I think share from the beginning, and then if you start to think, okay, they may be a little bit sensitive to some things that are going on, then create a separate board or something like that. Was there another part to your question?
Yes.
Was that it?
Where I am at, my background is in project management. I did that for 20 years. And now I am moving towards doing social media strategy. But
cool.
I also have a few people that come to me and are asking me, can you build a website? So I know HTML, CSS, but I'm stuck in JavaScript, of course. So I'm thinking of offering an alternative and tell them I can help you in WordPress or Squarespace, because I don't know Webflow yet. It's very complicated for me at this time. But I don't know if this will be a good thing to do, or if I just tell them, you know what, I cannot do it. I don't know if it's complicated. I need to decide if I go into WordPress or Squarespace, if that's a good option, or I even thought doing Shopify stores or something like that. But I'm looking for like, what would be your recommendation if I'm starting up? I'm like in the middle ground.
Again, just going back to this idea of outsourcing, you don't have to know everything. you know, if outsourcing just isn't the way you want to go, and you want to be involved in these projects and be very hands-on, I miss it. I absolutely miss doing that. Then I would maybe at the beginning outsourcing the JavaScript, outsourcing the maybe parts that you don't know or not too confident in, and learning from that person. Like, why not ask them to say, hey, if I hire you XYZ, can you do this? But also, can you just show me some of the things you're doing? Yeah, it's a client doesn't necessarily specifically ask for JavaScript, right? You just get a sense they've asked for features you know JavaScript is only capable of, right? Yeah. So yeah, I would personally learn from someone, get them involved, whilst you're obviously still learning on the side. But you don't want to say no to a client, especially if it's, you know, you want to try and make it work for them as much as you can, and to turn it away because, you know, you don't know JavaScript would be a bit of a shame. But yeah, I don't know. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. I'm thinking of outsourcing in the future, but the first couple of times I want to know how to do it, so I know what it takes, you know. So when someone gives me a quote, I know what they're talking about. So I want to learn.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's difficult because when you don't know, you want to be able to give a quote there and then. But I've had situations where I've said, cool, you know, I've got the requirements now. I'm going to go away and price this up for you, you know, and then I'll go away and I'll ask people, how long do you think it's going to take, all the rest of it, and then go back with a price. But it's whatever you're comfortable with at the end of the day.
And when you get a customer, do you ask them if they want it into like develop or on a pre-built page?
No. I'd like to ask, to be polite, but as a consultant and a website agency, we need to listen to their requirements and think what is the best for them. For instance, I'm working with someone at the moment that want to move on to Webflow, and sounds like a good idea, but I'm really taking into consideration the consequences of that, what it means for, you know, more than just your preferences. So for instance, they might be the client might not know this, but they might be plugging into certain services that you don't know about. And then by, you know, taking their website and putting it on Webflow or WordPress or whatever, you might have to then deal with those services, which might be a bad choice. So it's definitely worth considering what they want, but you need to do the investigation, and it needs to come from you as the expert, right? Yeah. Yes. And some people, and it's interesting. Here's another point. I went through a massive phase probably last year of clients wanting WordPress websites. And I would say, like, what is it about WordPress? And we get into a conversation. And what it actually turns out is that they just want a CMS, and that's their word for CMS. So they sometimes don't know the terminology. So it's really just cutting through. Technology should be the last thing that kind of takes into consideration. It's just what do they need, and what works for their website and their company, you know. So, hey, Elena.
Thank you for your feedback. Hi, Elena.
It's all right.
Hello.
I finished the presentation, but we're taking questions now. So, and by all means, guys, if you also want to answer the questions, or if you have any thoughts on those questions, like, jump in. Like, what do you think? Do you get requests to use a technology that you don't know about, or are you in situations where you don't know how to do something and you're wondering what to do?
So I'm kind of in like the same situation as Miralda, but what I did was I told the client openly, like, this Webflow is something that I want to learn. So I would do hourly on this project because I don't know how many hours or how long it's going to take for me to do it. But the catch is, like, you know, I'm learning Webflow as I go. So you may not get all the features that you really need. And mainly for that website that I'm working on currently, they don't need as many features. It's just going to be like a basic portfolio website. So it's like the perfect place to, like, you know, get started and get paid for your work that you're doing.
And they don't have a pre-existing website?
They do, but then they have to build it from scratch anyways. And they're open to anything new as well. So they don't have anything.
That sounds like a really good client.
Yeah. I mean, it's quite a bit of hunting to get that.
Yeah, for sure. Any other questions or comments?
I have another question.
Perfect. That's all right.
I heard you also do Shopify sometimes. I want to ask you about Liquid. Is that very hard to learn? Is that something that you recommend that I do, or just to stay away from it? So I can customize Shopify themes and things like that. If it comes to that.
Liquid specifically is not a big deal. To understand templating, there are plenty of templating languages, Mustache or things like that. It's pretty straightforward. It's it's knowing all of the functions of Shopify, and there are a lot. It's an ordeal to kind of learn them, and I would, if you want to offer Shopify websites, I'd commit to definitely learning the Liquid thing, and also we forget that I think Shopify offers just an API, so you don't have to build it in Liquid. You could build it in Webflow and interact with the API to get the data and pull it back. I mean, that's a bigger task, but it is an option if that what you were interested in.
I would say that I did not know about the API and the Webflow. So I went into Shopify maybe a year and a half ago. I did a couple of stores, but when I had to customize, I copy and paste some of the code. But it took me a long time to figure it out. So yes, what you're saying, I need to get acquainted with all the functions, and I will look more into it. But I just don't know if I should go there or not really, if it's not a good idea.
I dived in head first with Shopify websites because there's a lot of Shopify websites. I personally, shoot me if you disagree, but I personally think it's better than Webflow. I wouldn't recommend Webflow e-commerce just because e-commerce is, again, I don't like e-commerce websites at all. I think they're huge. They're just so big that Webflow, which has only been on the scene a short time with their e-commerce solution, it just can't compete with Shopify. So there's a lot of work going out there for Shopify. So it might be worth really just learning it and learning different functions. But I just dove in and just worked it out, reading the documentation. Do you read the documentation when you get involved in when you're copying and pasting this code? Do you look at the documentation?
Yes, and I subscribe as a Shopify partner, so I can have access to make stores and things like that. So.
Nice. Yeah. That's the best thing to do is just look through the documentation, look what's possible, and try and learn what you're copying and pasting. But yeah. Cool.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Gracias.
Anyone else have any comments on that?
Yeah.
Learning Liquid.
If I may jump in regarding an earlier question. So Miralda mentioned that she's trying to learn JavaScript, but it's a big learning curve, which I kind of agree with her. Would you recommend as a lighter option learning jQuery or playing with jQuery?
Yeah, jQuery takes a lot of headache out of JavaScript, but it doesn't take away the weird quirks of jQuery, JavaScript, and it doesn't take away how JavaScript works. So I don't know if you guys have seen my last video, but I talk about how you get an element and then you can modify that element. It's the same process in JavaScript. For instance, you might be familiar with $, and then the brackets and stuff like that. All that is in JavaScript is query selector all, and it's the same thing. But you have to do things slightly differently, which jQuery takes the headache. It does make it a bit easier, but I wouldn't expect you're not bypassing a lot of you're just bypassing writing a few more lines of code. You know, I recommend it in Webflow just because it's already there, so you might as well use it. Whereas on a clean project, it does add overhead. So yeah, I learned through jQuery, so removes a lot of headache is all I can say.
Yeah, and it might be like a stepping stone towards learning JavaScript rather than diving into JavaScript and being overwhelmed with everything that's going on.
Yeah.
Maybe performance trade-off with jQuery, but in with today's internet, I think it's pretty okay.
Yeah. And you can download a lighter version of jQuery too, but yeah, it's all okay, Trevor. But like I say, it doesn't take away from fundamentals. Like if I do this, then it fires a function, and calling functions and storing variables, that all exists still in jQuery. It has to exist. You're just like I say, bypassing writing a few more lines of code to do very simple things. And also it takes into consider browser compatibility too. So off the top of my head, a JavaScript method called class list doesn't exist on older browsers, but jQuery will, you just add class. That's all we need to do is add class, and it will just figure all that stuff out depending on which browser you're on. So it can save a lot of headache with writing cross-browser stuff. But yeah.